American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump is criticizing Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan for dismissing his call to end so-called birthright citizenship for the children of non-U.S. citizens born in the U.S. Trump tweets that Ryan should be focusing on holding the majority rather than giving his opinions on birthright citizenship, something he knows nothing about. Ryan, who is retiring from Congress, said Tuesday that Trump obviously could not end birthright citizenship through executive action. President Trump travels to Florida today for a campaign rally in support of Republican candidates. Fox's Eben Brown reports from Florida.
The president comes here tonight to rally support for his political allies in Florida, and there's already thousands waiting in line to see him. Sandy Shaw wants to hear him speak on one particular issue.
Immigration. I'm not as much concerned for the wall as I am for the change in getting these immigrant citizenship, because it's too hard. And they don't follow the law as it is for letting them in here.
The president hopes he'll muster support for two Republicans now embroiled in very tight races. That's Rick Scott running for Senate and Ron DeSantis running for governor. In Estero, Florida, Eben Brown, Fox News.
A college football player is accused of trying to plot a murder. Fox's Derek Dennis has that story.
He was barely on the team, a walk-on football player at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And now 22-year-old linebacker Isaiah Bullock is off the roster and in jail, accused of plotting to murder several family members of an acquaintance. Why? Who was Bullock allegedly trying to kill? Police aren't saying, but we know the intended targets are not affiliated with Rutgers. Only Bullock is. His coach won't comment, and we don't know if Bullock has retained an attorney yet. University says they're starting disciplinary proceedings, but that could be the least of his troubles. Bullock is jailed on 2 counts of attempted murder and conspiracy.
LifeSite News has a new web host, at least for now. The conservative website posted information over the weekend saying it was under attack. Steve Jelsevec, co-founder and managing director of LifeSite News, explains.
We did a story just prior to this event that happened about a person called Adam Flanders and how he had succeeded in getting web hosting companies to take down the websites of Mass Resistance and Americans for Truth about homosexuality.
In its report, LifeSite News included a photo of Adam Flanders, in this case a police arrest photo.
He claims that he has copyright on that, but of course there's no such thing as copyright on such a photograph. It's a public domain item. Anyway, on Saturday night at 8:30 p.m., I happened to check my email, and there was an email from our web hosting company, and they said they had been, for the last few months, receiving lots of emails from Adam Flanders, who is convicted of sex abuse with a minor in August 2006, and he's currently registered as a sex offender in both Maine and California. But now he's holding them personally accountable, the people who run the web hosting company, and made all kinds of threats against them.
Jelsevec then learned the web hosting company was dumping LifeSite News.
Thanks be to God, our webmaster was able to switch us to another company, but now already Adam Flanders is now contacted this new company.
Jelsevec says he's been in talks with attorneys for LifeSite News. A timely warning from the Drug Enforcement Agency. Authorities say candy could be laced with drugs. Fox's Jim McKay.
Especially now that marijuana is legal in several states and people ingest it in candy form, the DEA is putting out a warning for parents to be on the lookout for any odd-looking candy wrappers, as some pot edibles, as they're called, can look like traditional candy. The DEA giving some examples: Munchie Way in a wrapper that looks like a Milky Way, Rasta Reese's, and Twixt. They're also warning about candy laced with methamphetamine. DEA says if you come across any strange candy with strange labels, just take it to your local police department.
And it's no trick. Gas prices in the month of October 7 cents cheaper than they started the month. The national average is currently $2.80 for a gallon of regular.
Bishop E.W. Jackson.
We really need an awakening in this country. We need for the Spirit of God to pour out of not just from heaven, but out of you and me into the hearts and lives of people. You know, you're going to have to answer to God one day for the things that you do. That's the message that people need to understand.
Tuned in to The Awakening, weekday mornings at 9 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Now, how ridiculous. We're the only country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits. It's ridiculous, and it has to end.
It is possible to believe in responsible gun ownership and to believe that there should be regulations on that. Anthony Scalia said that.
On Tuesday, we also saw the highest consumer confidence numbers that we have seen since the year 2000. Tuesday is coming quickly. Let's keep America and the American economy moving forward, not backwards.
I'm not like other politicians. You've seen what happens. I've kept my promises.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. Oh, so good to be with you. Today's Wednesday, and it's a great day for all of us here in America to be grateful to be here and also to be grateful to be on the radio. And guess what? I have so much for you today. We are going to be delving into promises kept by the president. I think it's time for an update. I think it's time for a checkup. We've done this segment before on the show, and I love doing it because it is a biblical precept that when you make a promise or swear an oath to anyone, you are supposed to keep it. And so we see the president doing that. In fact, I found it fascinating to learn from Dr. Carol Swain, who she provides commentary on this network and sometimes comes on interviews on many of the programs here. And she's a doctor. She has an extensive educational background and has written many books. And really, she's one of the best commentators of our time and thought leaders. And she said she was attending a conference where someone from the president's cabinet stood up to speak for a little bit and talked about this whiteboard that he's had in offices there at the White House since he was inaugurated. And on the whiteboard, he has a bunch of promises that he made to the American people when he was campaigning. And as he completes them, he writes the date that it was completed and then crosses it off the list. This is a man who's bent on delivering what he promised to the American people. That is an honorable kind of way to live. And we should all be thankful that he lives that way. And so, you know, he's a human being. He's got flaws and everything else. But when we have an opportunity to pat someone on the back or say thanks, we definitely want to do that here on the show. And so really grateful for that. So here's who we have on this hour. We're going to talk to John Zmirak. He's the editor of The Stream. He's going to come on and chat with us about President Trump's possible executive order ending birthright citizenship. And remember, it's not, I know we're all trying to find ways to talk about this cogently, but it's not that he's ending it. It's that he's righting a wrong that has been in effect since the 60s or so, when Democrats decided that they needed a permanent underclass and they couldn't count on blacks to be that permanent underclass. And so they looked to expand their base through illegal immigration. And ever since then, we've seen court cases and rulings that have really flouted what the Constitution says about what it means to be an American citizen. The president wants to right that wrong, so it's not him ending anything. He's simply restoring the rule of law back to what the Constitution actually mandates in the Bill of Rights, namely the 14th Amendment. So we're also going to have some audio from, remember yesterday I said we were hearing from Air Force General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy, and then it turned out we were hearing from Customs and Border Patrol Chief. And so I have a little bit of audio of him talking about the concertina wire to kind of write that. We're going to hear that today as well. And then we're going to circle back around to Missouri, where Claire McCaskill has suddenly found her Republican roots. It's so awesome. She likes Donald Trump now. She's upset with Democrats who are crazy and screaming people out of restaurants. I mean, she's just sounding like she's sounding like Claire McCaskill during a campaign year. Yeah, so we're going to hear it's a little tidbit of her, and we're going to go over some of the opportunities that she's had over the past couple of years since the president's been elected to show that she really can govern from the middle and respect the wishes of a very red state like Missouri that behaves like a purple state occasionally, but usually is pretty red. She could have exercised her voting rights as a senator on behalf of Missourians. Numerous occasions. We're going to highlight those. We're going to take some calls. Call lines will be open, that third segment, at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Right now, I want to get into the Daily Confession. So this is awesome. And oh, by the way, in the intro to the show, you heard some audio from Stacey Abrams. She's the Democrats' candidate for the governorship of the great state of Georgia. And she feels that she can quote Justice Antonin Scalia on guns. And so I counter her quote on guns with this Antonin Scalia quote on God. God assumed from the beginning that the wise of the world would view Christians as fools. He has not been disappointed. If I've brought any message today, it is this: have the courage to have your wisdom regarded as stupidity, be fools for Christ, and have the courage to suffer the contempt of the sophisticated world. I wonder if Stacey Abrams would care to quote that particular missive from the late great justice of the Supreme Court. My 10 cents is on no, but I just thought I'd counter her quote with that. So the daily confession for today, I have 2 verses for you. And we're continuing our theme on how God sees us. And this is an important key to our faith. So if we think that God's up in heaven and he's not interested in our lives, he just wants to see us obey a certain set of rules, then when we mess up, our instinctive reaction will be, well, I've messed up. I got to get myself right before I can go to God. I'm angry. I can't go to God when I'm angry. I'm upset. I can't show God. God doesn't have time for me and my emotions. He's interested in my obedience. Well, God is interested in our obedience, but he's interested in every aspect of us, every bit of us, and he knows us inside and out. So the fact that we're angry is no secret to him. The fact that we're hurt or that we're upset or that we're joyous or happy or maybe even experiencing some schadenfreude over someone else getting their just desserts, he knows all of those things, and he understands the feelings that we have because Jesus came here, lived as a human being from baby up to adulthood, so the feelings that we have are understood by our Father in heaven. That's the amazing thing, because he's a holy God, and he otherwise would not be able to identify with our sinful nature, but he can through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. So the first verse I want to go into is, the Lord delights in those who fear him, who put their hope in his unfailing love. In this instance, the fear does not refer to actual fright or the kind of fear that makes you want to avoid someone or think that that person means harm towards you, the natural fight or flight fear response that human beings have, an instinctual response to get away from something that could harm you or will harm you or imminent danger. That is not the fear that is being spoken of here. This is the fear that means that you ultimately respect God and understand who he is and who you are, and you understand that relationship, and you want to obey him because you want to please him. And the underlying understanding there is that obedience brings blessing, closer relationship to God, and the further into that you go, the more joy you experience, the more peace, the more understanding, the more wisdom. And so we want to have the fear of the Lord. It also says, second half of that says, who put their hope in his unfailing love, that he is absolutely a God of love that holds that love for us no matter what, and that we can rely on it. We don't have to worry about him changing his mind or waking up one morning and not liking the arrangement of the stars and saying, you know what, I just don't care anything about those humans anymore, or that particular human. That's not his nature. To go on, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend, to understand with all saints what is the breadth and length and depth and height, so the entirety of God's love, and to know the love of Christ, who gave the ultimate sacrifice for us and experienced the sin debt for every human who ever lived and every human who ever would live, all at once for hours on the cross. He experienced the sin debt and payment for that sin for every single human being. The love of Christ, which passeth all knowledge, that you might be filled with all of the fullness of God. And that's Ephesians 3:17 through 19. So a lot to unpack there, but suffice it to say, to just simplify it ultimately, that God's love for us is so great that it nearly passes all human understanding, but that we can know it through studying his word and drawing closer to him, obedience, and in all of that we strengthen our faith. So God is not angry with us. He's not thinking bad thoughts about us or saying bad things about us. Rather, he longs for closeness with us, an individual relationship, and for us to fear him and be in right relationship with him, and to place our hope in his unfailing love, because it is the only thing that cannot fail. Man can fail, politicians can fail, political systems can fail, governments can fail, grocery checkout systems can fail. That's a story for another segment. Husbands, wives, families can fail. Nations can fail, but God cannot fail. He will not fail you. And that's the best place for us to put our hope and our faith, because all other things can and will fail, but not God. So that's the Daily Confession. Confess those scriptures to God and experience the fullness that he has for us. We can go into some more of that as the week continues on. I also want to highlight for you, we are doing Operation Christmas Child, and October 22nd through November 11th is when we're going to be running that. We also have, and this is just, you got to go to the website, SamaritansPurse.org/OCC, SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. Now, why do we want you to do this? Because these little boxes with what are trinkets to us in America, we're so wealthy. We have no idea of the extreme poverty of children living in nations where they're worried about what they're going to eat, the one meal a day or even 3 or 4 meals a week that they're going to get. They don't consider that they could possibly receive gifts for Christmas. And when we send them $9 worth of gifts in a Christmas shoebox or some, it's a small token to us. And it doesn't even represent even a small fraction of what we give to each other here in this country for Christmas. But the $9 per shoebox gift donation online allows you to follow your box and receive a QR code to find out the destination of your gift. And it gives these kids a glimpse into the love of Christ through the giving of gifts. And children have come to know the Lord. And at very minimum, they know someone outside of their own family, outside of their country, is thinking of them and praying for them and caring for them. So National Collection Week is almost here. Operation Christmas Child has collected and delivered gift-filled shoeboxes to more than 157 million children since the project began in 1993. Now, I'm so excited about it. You can go to SamaritansPurse.org/OCC, and you can find out how to participate. The actual collection week is November 12th through 19th, where you can drop off your shoebox at one of nearly 5,000 collection sites. So you get to pack your shoebox and then send it over, drop it off, and it's going to be fantastic. You can find the closest collection site near you and get more info on what to pack and what works, what doesn't, things that the kids appreciate and also kind of need. And you can get all of that at SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. And that's where you can go to get that information. So thank you for, working with me here. And I'm so excited about doing it. My kids love packing the boxes. And, it's funny because you're often surprised by what kids like, especially when they get to the teen years. We see them as being these kind of adults. You're not sure. It's like a hybrid adult. It's a kid. It's an adult. They love these. They love choosing the items. They love packing them and thinking about what the kids are going to do when they get them. So SamaritansPurse.org/OCC to find out more and partner with us. Now, I want to get to my 289 accomplishments thus far. So obviously, I'm not just going to sit here for 2 hours and read, a list of whatever the accomplishments were, but we're going to highlight some of them and we're going to punctuate. And then I'll have a link on the Facebook page and on the Twitter feed that you can click and go through and read them for yourself and share them. And I love pats on the back. I don't expect them, but it's nice when they come. And when the president is doing something good, because I'm certainly going to criticize him when things happen that I don't like. And his cabinet members, you heard what I said about Kirstjen Nielsen last week, the DHS secretary, and they've tightened that up since then. Not saying it's because of me, but I did weigh in. And so in the instance where the president is actually keeping promises, I will be no different. And programming note for those who think that this somehow how my persona here on the radio has anything to do with. So are you the same person at work with your work folks as you are at home? I should hope not. Just a note. All right. So we will actually listen to this audio on the way back in. It's CBS saying that the president kept a promise on one of the promises that he made, which was border security. It's pretty amazing. We'll hear that on the way back in with John Smirek, editor of The Stream. Stay right there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with The Legacy Moment. I've had my share of conversations with people who refuse to forgive. I know a family, for example, torn apart because of the wife's refusal to forgive her husband for something that happened years ago. It's turned into a deadly poison that has afflicted their children and those close to them. She is a very bitter, angry woman. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't confront those who have offended us. That is not what I mean by forgiveness. Forgiveness is not denial, and it's not just sweeping things under the carpet. But on the other hand, what I am saying is this: forgiveness is not optional. It's not something we can decide to do or not to do based upon our disposition. I think we can learn something from Job, beginning at verse 8 in Job chapter 42. Now therefore take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves. And my servant Job will pray for you. For I will accept him, so that I may not do with you according to your folly, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Neamathite went and did as the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job. Now listen to verse 10. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends. When he prayed for his friends. That's an expression of Job's forgiveness. Job forgave his friends, and God restored his life and benefits and blessing. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Is there someone you need to forgive? Why not set yourself and them free by forgiving them? You're putting on hold the joy and blessings of God in your life.
Thanks, Crawford, and thank you for listening to today's Legacy Moment, a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The Trump administration is also launching a major military operation to, quote, harden the southern border and block illegal immigration. It includes more than 5,000 active duty troops to help Customs and Border Patrol agents in Texas, Arizona, and California. The president said last night he also plans tent cities to hold migrants while they apply for asylum in the U.S. Now, the operation targets a large caravan of migrants from Central America that is now moving through southern Mexico. Weijia Zhang is at the White House, where the president has told would-be border crossers, our military is waiting for you. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning, Nora. This plan is a promise kept by President Trump, who has recently ramped up the threats of using military might to stop that caravan.
And as you know, we'll be talking about some updates. I was reading this morning. I spent just as much time as I could squeeze out of this morning reading everything I could find about what's going on with the caravan. So watching some videos of real world reporting from there. And what I found is, first of all, these people really underestimated what it meant to walk 1,000 miles to the first destination and then another 1,000 miles to our southern border. Some of them are turning back. Some of them have really heart-wrenching stories about children they've left home so that they could travel to America and force their way into the country. And their children are at home and they've stopped eating because they miss their mom. And so they're turning back. They're looking for rides back home to their home country. Others are demanding buses because this is a physically, I wouldn't say it's impossible but for someone like me walking 2,000 miles, I would say at this point in my life, it's physically impossible. I would not undertake that. Now, maybe the sense of desperation that they have is what's forcing them into it, but the wherewithal to continue on is lacking. And so they're now having certain organizations are funding truck beds and buses and et cetera, but they don't have enough for the entire group. So the numbers are dwindling a little bit, but they also have additional migrant groups forming up into caravans and following on to the original one. I saw an estimate that said it could possibly be 50,000 people at our southern border, which is why I retweeted a picture of a train heading through Arizona loaded up with tanks and, just all kinds of military hardware headed south to the border. Why should they stay in tents? We are not required to provide asylum seekers with hotel accommodations while they await their adjudication. We're not required to do anything. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome John Zmirak. He's the editor of The Stream. TheStream.org is the website. Thank you, John, for joining the show today.
Thank you. I'm senior editor, and it's just stream.org. So people can find it. Stream.org.
Oh, stream.org. I'm sorry. Stream.org is the website, not the. Stream.org, simply stream.org, right. And you can find fantastic writing from the authors over there. It's just some of the best stuff you're going to find on the internet, and really good commentary as well.
Thank you. Now, I think it's really essential that these people not be admitted onto American soil, because the moment their foot touches American soil, they get a lawyer from George Soros or the U.S. Catholic bishops, and I'm a Catholic, but our bishops behaving disgracefully on this. They're just trying to fill the pews with new people and get money from federal contracts. 40% of the bishop's money comes from federal contracts serving immigrants. And 1 out of 5 American Catholics is an immigrant, mostly from Latin America. So they're just trying to fill the pews that they're emptying because of scandals. So and any churchman who says that we have a moral obligation as Americans to admit anyone who shows up, however false their asylum claim, usually that person has a financial interest in it.
Wow. Thank you for that information, because I think a lot of people, especially Catholics that I know who are devout, Christian Bible believing people, they're kind of ashamed of the ongoing scandal that's roiling the Catholic Church with the priest abuse and all of that. And then it's kind of like adding insult to injury to find out that the church has been so closely linked to the refugee money coming from the government, which has actually been pushed through the UN. So it's another loss of our sovereignty that we even participate in the UN refugee program. And
I
so
agree.
it's hard for people because they want to stay with their church, but it's tough times for Catholics around the country.
Yes, it is, and it's a tough time for America. I mean, if we let this caravan barge into our country, there are tens of millions more people ready to come. According to I think it's the Harris poll. No, the Gallup poll. There are 175 million adults want to emigrate to the United States. That doesn't count the children they would bring along. That's, that would increase our population by 50%. That would bankrupt our welfare system. That would bankrupt Medicaid. That would close our hospitals. Our schools would be unsustainable. Our entire economy would collapse. But the Democrats would be pretty happy because they'd have a huge voter base of people looking for government programs. They would have turned America into Venezuela. And turning America slowly into Venezuela has been the Democrats' plan for a long time. Now they found they can speed it up because they don't have to worry if they lose black voters, if they lose Hispanic voters or white working-class voters. They can replace them with foreigners who will come in and expect a handout from the government because that's the kind of political system they grew up in.
And so, John, I want to point something out, and I need your feedback here because I know you've been writing about this and researching, and I think one of the things that people are stuck on is that you mentioned this at the very beginning. You said once they put their feet on American soil, they get these lawyers paid for by George Soros, but it's also a sense of due process that they get. It's basically a gift from our government to any human being. We value human rights so much in this country that we don't just limit human rights to people who hold citizenship here. So we don't treat non-citizens differently than citizens when it comes to them standing before the court and holding their rights. But that is being abused.
So it costs us like $50,000 to litigate to prove what is obvious, that they're not refugees because they turned down refuge in Mexico. By international law, you're supposed to take refuge in the first safe country that if you're allegedly being persecuted. Now, if you're being persecuted by the government of Honduras, why are you able to leave in broad daylight? Why are you waving Honduran flags? And why are you turning down refugee status in Mexico? You're shopping around for the country with the best welfare system. On the face of it, not one of these people deserves refugee or asylum status. But if they make it to U.S. soil, it costs us tens of thousands of dollars for each one. We have veterans hospitals that don't have enough bandages, that don't have enough medicine, where people are waiting for months to get treated, who served our country. And we're going to be spending our money litigating, obviously, on the face of it, fake refugee claims just because they snuck across our border. This is outrageous.
So I saw a suggestion online that the American military, because there's all this, the conjecture is flying, and people who they're not lawyers, they don't play a lawyer on TV, they haven't read the first thing about the law, or out there pontificating about what the president can and can't do. Meanwhile, he's been consulting with counsel, White House legal counsel, and other scholars. So the possibility of this executive order is not something that he's toying around with. It's researched, and there's a possibility it could be constitutional. But beyond that, do we have the right to operate our military along the border, possibly incursioning or, incurring into Mexico? Do we have the ability to have our troops on the ground there?
Well, the president has the right to close the country's borders at any time if he regards it as being in the national interest, period. That was reaffirmed after the ban on countries with lots of terrorism, which the left called the Muslim ban, though it wasn't.
Right.
That was while a bunch of circuit courts, attacked the president's constitutional authority. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. The president can close the Mexican border, and he should. I don't think he has the authority to move troops onto Mexican soil without Mexico's consent. That would be an act of war. Probably not the wisest thing. We should have our troops locking arms at the border. If it literally takes that, these people cannot be allowed to set foot on our soil. Each one will cost us tens of thousands of dollars for an obviously fraudulent claim.
But okay, two things. First of all, I understand the part about putting our troops on their soil and that being an act of war, but them allowing people from another country to traverse their country to assail our border illegally is an act of war also. In these numbers, we're talking about 1,700 a day on a normal day, but these people plan to present themselves in 10,000. A group of 10,000 is an act of war, in my opinion.
Look, I agree with you morally, but I think prudentially the wise thing to do is probably not to invade and occupy northern Mexico, but rather to ask them to let us do it. I mean, if they will let us do it, that would be great. If they would let us occupy like the 10 feet of their soil on their side of the border, and in return, we'll help them send those people back to Honduras. We can send trucks down, we can help move them home, but this is a make-or-break issue for Trump politically. I think if he's seen to be caving on the border before the midterm elections, which really are a national impeachment referendum coming up on November 6th, I think it will depress turnout, and it would be very bad for the Republicans, who would end up losing the House and getting impeached. So the president has to stand absolutely firm on this.
Okay, so the second thing that I was going to say is, so I've seen all of the reports. I've heard the chief of Border Patrol and also the head of U.S. Northern American Command. Everyone's talking about the movement of assets and troops to the border. And you mentioned locking arms, but they're actually going to have concertina wire. They have 26 miles of it already there. They say they're ordering more for delivery. So they're planning on basically the thing that we've asked for 30 plus years, and the thing that we've demanded that brought us President Trump, which is the border being actually sealed with a wall. It's going to be a makeshift wall, but essentially this caravan is prompting the thing that American voters have wanted for all of these years, which is it will be impenetrable. At that point, because I in my mind, I see all these scenarios, and mind you, it's just something that I think might happen, but I've been alive for a while, and I think the human nature of these people is pretty obvious in their comments to Fox News when they're being interviewed. They would then camp out on the Mexican side, waiting for any opportunity to cross illegally. Does this precipitate the need for a base on our southern border?
I'm sorry, repeat the last part of your question.
In other words, we're going to have, in addition to the almost 10,000 U.S. Customs and Border Patrol individuals who are always down there, we have already a little over 2,000 National Guardsmen down there. We're getting 5,200 active duty U.S. troops, and we're getting C-130s and C-17s full of armament and equipment taken down there. Are we seeing the beginnings of a U.S. military base at the southern border?
That would be a great idea. I've actually been arguing for some time that the president should cite military bases at the major crossing points of the Mexican border. Use eminent domain if you have to take the land, compensate the landowners, build U.S. military bases all along the border, and then use the Department of Defense funding to connect them with a wall if you can't get the money from the do-nothing Paul Ryan open borders types in the Congress.
You know, your mind is suspiciously akin to my own. I like it, John. I like it. I said that last week. I didn't know you'd already said it, but I figured, someone else must have thought of this. It's because
we have a lot of ideas like this in my new book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Immigration. I hope people will check it out.
Okay, yes.
Go into all these sorts of
Please tweet me the link so I can retweet you, because I want to get that out to post that link all over the place on social media. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because that is an idea that, in my opinion, is past its time. And it also circumvents the need to have Congress involved, because the U.S. military opens and closes bases all day, every day, 365 days a year, without any congressional oversight beyond what the Department of Defense has to do to reporting to individual subcommittees. So why wouldn't they do that? Or maybe that's what they're going to possibly come to slowly, but
maybe that will come. Maybe that will come from this. That this might be, God writes straight with crooked people. Maybe this will be the genesis of a military wall that can later be completed by a civilian wall. But I mean, the idea of the U.S. troops, of our troops guarding our own border instead of the borders of Afghanistan or Iraq, should not be that shocking. Actually, our military is supposed to protect our country first.
Yeah, and sometimes I would, how you wake up in the middle of the night and then you turn to like a weird thought. Many, many nights, my weird thought has been $1 billion a month in Afghanistan. And it's something that I just can't get over. Like, I can't get over it because of, you mentioned the veterans, 387,000 veterans dying without ever seeing a doctor at the VA. Just things like that, it makes your blood boil. And when I think of our southern border and what the people who are being trafficked into our country for sexual slavery are experiencing, it just, to me,
80% of women and girls who come into America illegally from Central America are rape victims. They get raped on the route, according to the Huffington Post. And if we keep accepting people, we are enabling that. We are inviting more women to take that risk. We are morally implicated in that.
Yeah, I can't handle that. That's something I can't beat. Like, that's the same to me in severity as the fact that they force all of us to support Planned Parenthood through our tax dollars.
Right.
I have to draw the line somewhere. So we've talked about the military base. I want to give you, the last minute here in this segment to just whatever else you want us to know about the birthright citizenship via the EO. Do you expect him to pull the trigger before the midterm?
I don't know. I think birthright citizenship, I think it is not constitutionally mandated, and it has been massively abused with people using their children as anchor babies. But I think the much more important issue is building a wall and demanding workplace verification so you can't get a job in America without proving you're here to work, legally here to work. That would dry up the problem without having a thorny constitutional fight. That said, I think it was smart of the president to bring this up because he needs to win the impeachment referendum. And I hope everybody listening will get out on Tuesday and vote. I don't care if your local Republican is named Rhino McAdulterer. You get out there and you vote for him this time because we cannot let the inmates take over the asylum.
John, I think you put that very well. And I would just echo by saying, get out there, get to my Twitter feed, Stacey on the Right. John's going to tweet me, and I'm going to retweet the link so you can get the book so we can all learn more about, because his mind, clearly, he's at the tip of the spear. He says military base with wall in between and military base, more wall. I like that more than I'm able to basically share with you right now. So,
or another option is set the Rio Grande on fire, like the Cuyahoga River was in the 70s. I mean, this has to be stopped by any means necessary, if I can quote Malcolm X.
Oh, I like it. I'm with you. We're of one mind here. John Zmirak, he's the editor of The Stream.
You all have a great day.
You too. Stream.org to find out more. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right and your calls at 866-963-2037 right after this.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something or why you couldn't attend a certain event instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God, but fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to him. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, author and seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, where did the idea come from that there were little green men who lived on Mars?
Chris, the idea that there was intelligent life on Mars was given a big boost in the late 19th century when the American astronomer Percival Lowell claimed that he saw linear features on Mars, which he claimed were canals. Later, it became obvious that the Martian atmosphere could not support advanced forms of life, so they've given up the idea. What they haven't given up is the idea that there might be microbes on Mars, single-cell life. This idea is fueling the modern expeditions to Mars to find water. The idea is if they can find water, then maybe there's life. But while water is a necessary condition for life, it's not sufficient. Life is much too complex to have formed haphazardly. It needs a lot more than water. NASA could save a lot of money by going back to Genesis for their starting point.
Thank you, Dr. John. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Poll Parade with Fox News Director of Polling, Dana Blanton.
Exit polls. You know about them, right? They've been a part of election night coverage going back to the 1960s. And since the 1990s, networks have run exit polls as a group. They're conducted on Election Day. Voters are asked who they voted for and why as they walk out or exit their voting location. Except not everyone votes on Election Day anymore. 37 states allow early voting. For 3 states, voting is entirely by mail. That means exit polls miss a big slice of the electorate. That's one reason Fox is working with the Associated Press on a new approach that reflects how Americans vote today. It includes a probability-based, state-by-state survey combined with a massive poll conducted online. We're interviewing voters and non-voters to get a full picture of the election. That's why this election day, Fox anchors won't talk about exit polls. It's now the Fox News Voter Analysis, and it covers voting in all states, whether in person or by mail. I'm Dana Blanton, and that's your Poll Parade.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
And make no mistakes, as we sit right here today, we have about 800 soldiers that are on their way to Texas right now. They're coming from Fort Campbell, they're coming from Fort Knox, they're moving closer to the border. They're going to continue their training, and they're ready to deploy to be actually employed on the border. We're deploying aviation assets that can quickly transport our CBP personnel. But it isn't just the men and equipment and the soldiers that we're bringing. We've already brought critical material, and it's already in place. We have enough concertina wire to cover up to 22 miles already deployed, already to the border. We have additional concertina wire that we can string with over 150 miles available. Additionally, working at where the reinforcements are needed so we can get it exactly where CBP wants us to put it. By the end of this week, we will deploy over 5,200 soldiers to the southwest border. That is just the start of this operation. We'll continue to adjust the numbers and inform you of those, but please know that's in addition to the 2,092 that are already employed from our National Guard Operation Guardian Support that's been so effective.
And that was Air Force General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy, head of the U.S. Northern Command, U.S. military sending miles and miles and miles of concertina wire. Now, 150 miles may sound like just a tad out of the 2,100 miles of border that we have. But remember, we already have some wall that is actually in at residence there. Some of it is rocky and kind of mountainous in its presentation. Some of it is a waterway. And as John Zmirak, editor of The Stream, just shared with us, there's also, the ownership possibilities. Like, obviously, you have these people who are ranchers who own that property that goes up to the southern border. And I personally think that people who may have been reticent to allow the government to build a wall before would be happily ready to give into it now because of the crime that they've experienced and because of the mayhem of having people crossing their property and some dying on the property, and also just the constant threat of assault that they live under now. But it's not really about what people want. It's about the law. It's about maintaining our national sovereignty. And I don't want people to think that there's somehow some kind of exaggeration going on here. Johns, Merrick, and any of the others that you hear saying that not one of them can be allowed to set foot on American soil, they're not kidding about that. They're not over exaggerating. I've even seen some media types on the left saying, they're saying this is an invasion. It's a horde. Well, if you think 10,000 isn't an invasion, wait until the 10,000 get through and then 100,000 present themselves. Wait until there are millions of people flying into airports in South America and driving, flying, whatever they need to do to get to Mexico City so that they can present themselves at our border and demand asylum. You understand that so we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have the internet. There are many people who sit in their home country, in Western countries and in third world countries. They have cell phones and they look at the pictures of just go on Instagram and type anything in, just type in any nonsense and see what comes up for Americans. We have a lot of prosperity here, and a lot of people would do anything to get in here and evade deportation so that they could take part in that. It's like you're sitting outside in the cold with a thin coat on, and you can see a family inside, and the only thing that's dividing you from all that hot, piping hot, delicious, aromatic food they're partaking in is a thin, flimsy door or a curtain. At some point, your stomach's going to take over and you're going in. Now, what happens? And he mentioned, John mentioned that, you'd have all these people coming here and hundreds of thousands of people coming. What we're not discussing here is the repelling of an invasion. We have a standing militia in this country of unknown numbers. We don't know exactly how many Americans are in the militia. We do know that there are more than 2 times as many guns as there are people. There are at least 2 or 3 guns in this country for every man, woman, and child, legal or illegal. And the gun-owning population of this country would stand 2. There's no way 100,000 people are entering this country. So I'm not saying we want that. I don't know anybody who's a gun owner or someone who's a preparedness person who's hankering for a fight with foreigners or wants to shoot people or defend their property, but they're ready to do it. And we should be ready to do it. America is our home. And it's not about whether or not the people who are coming are women or children or deserving or anything like that. It's that they've refused asylum in Mexico. They want to come here because this is the nicest place they can go and they feel they have a right. And I'm here to say, for my own self, they don't have a right. Why? I've served this country. I've been all over the world. I've seen what it's like in other places. And I know for a fact that we do have national sovereignty and we have a right to say who can come in and who cannot. And we will continue to do that. And, God bless Donald Trump for even bringing up the birthright citizenship issue from the presidency. Now let's see what he's able to do with it. Let's go to the phones. We have George in Oklahoma. Hey, George, thanks for calling the show today.
All right, thank you. And my observation is that this could have been avoided if they would have just cooperated with the president and put up the wall. This could have been this is not necessary. And also, it seemed like McConnell is the best friend that the Democrats ever had. And also, with about the impeachment, the potential that the Democrats might impeach the president, and all this talk about, well, the judges who, the renegade judges who are with the judicial activism, and they can, and it is in the Constitution of our forefathers for judges to act that way, and these people, oh, well, we can't do that, or we can't impeach the judges, oh, no, that would never work. And yet they cried, oh, we can't, if we lose the House and stuff like that, they're going to impeach the president. Well, the time to impeach these judicial activists is long overdue. because they certainly the judicial branch is supposed to be the weakest branch because all they're supposed to do is decide not to make laws, and that was my comment.
You spot on. Thank you, George, for that comment. And I got to say, you have a better understanding than most people I see on TV of this subject. You actually should be on there making comments so people could be better informed. Thank you for calling. He's right. We do tend to have this, we treat even our local judges, they're up for retention every so many years, depending on your state constitution. Here in the state of Missouri, we have all of the judges at the appellate level for the state of Missouri are up for retention in the November election. And most people see that one and they either don't vote or they vote yes to retain. And so these people get away with making these rulings, giving hardcore offenders a slap on the wrist, tossing out cases where people have killed. And I mean, it's just amazing what they get away with. Now, some of them really are good jurists and they treat their job seriously. And when they come up for retention, they're like, will I be retained? But for the most part, they will. In every state across this country, judges are retained routinely by voters. And so I just encourage you, first of all, we need our conservative organizations. Your state conservative organization should be presenting you with a guide on the background of judges who are up for retention. Here in Missouri, we have Frontline magazine run by the Constitutional Coalition, which is the brainchild of Donna Hearn. She used to be the secretary of the Department of Education. I think she was either the first or the second one under Ronald Reagan. She's also a pro-life advocate, and she does a lot of different things here in Missouri, specifically this is nationwide conference of some of the very best authors and et cetera who come to Missouri. And it's once a year in January. And it's really about education. It's Education Policy Conference, and it's huge numbers of homeschool parents come, and the experts present on that information. But one of the things that she does is every time the judges are up for retention, she has a breakdown that's done by an attorney, and each of the judges is researched, and you get to have like a snapshot of what they were like before they were on the bench, and then you get some of the high points of what they've done since they've been on the bench, and then she has a recommendation, vote to retain or vote to not retain. It's a suggestion, but at least you have a lot of information with which to make the decision. When in doubt, vote them out. That's the way I operate. Before I'd ever had Frontline magazine delivered to my home, and it's a newspaper-like thing. I should grab one, and I might have one here on my desk. I'll have to show you on the live stream so people can see what I'm talking about. It comes out, I don't think it's every month. It comes out periodically, but before the election, you get a few different copies outlining the ballot initiatives and specifically the retention of judges. This is a very needed exercise for us as Americans because we tend to say, well, if they're already there and I haven't heard anything in the news, they're probably doing okay. Here in Missouri, the Law Association, so the Missouri Bar, actually chooses the candidates that are presented for the governor to select for appointment to the bench. So the Missouri Bar Association is run by liberals. So even their most conservative person would be probably unacceptable to someone like you or me. So that's something that needs to be changed, but I think you have to go into the Constitution like we need an amendment. And we've done that before. We amended the Constitution to say marriage is between one man and one woman here in the state of Missouri. I mean, when we get our dander up, we'll do a thing or two. And I know across the country in the 32 states where this program is heard, Americans are no different. When they're riled up and they understand there's injustice, they want to do something to stop it. But carefully consider not skipping over the judge retention area of your ballot. If you have judges up for retention, spend a little time on the internet, see if you can find something. Go to your family policy organizations for your state and see what you can find. And, let's be as informed as possible about retaining these judges because they're the ones who set up the system. In other words, they either rule correctly on a case or they're overturned at the appellate level after the state level, which then routes cases to the Supreme Court or prevents them from going to the Supreme Court. And the more judicial activism we have and the less we actually recall judges, the more empowered they feel. And George said just now, they're supposed to be the least powerful branch of government. But in a lot of ways, especially with the Supreme Court fight for Kavanaugh, we've seen that they're not only not the least important, to liberals, they are the only thing that matters. Yeah, they want to win the presidency, but they know if they don't have the presidency and they have the courts, they might as well have the presidency. They can cripple the president, as they've tried to do with Donald Trump. So now I want to turn to the state of Missouri. And, Claire McCaskill's race against Josh Hawley, she wants to keep her seat. He wants to take it. And the race has national implications. But what's most interesting about it is that now national media has descended upon the state of Missouri because leftist national media wants to see Claire McCaskill stay where she is. She's a solid vote for Planned Parenthood, abortion funding, abortion on demand, and the expansion of abortion rights. She's also not in favor of gun ownership. She doesn't think that we need a wall at our southern border, and she doesn't support lawful immigration over illegal immigration. But that's not how she sounds now that she's close to the election. And Josh Hawley, who was a long shot, is now not just nipping at her tails, but ahead of her in some polls. She's actually visibly afraid of losing her seat. Now, I just got this teensy little bit because she says the crazy Democrats are the ones who are doing all of these, tossing people out of restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. And what she's trying to say is that she's not one of them. Now, I agree. I've never seen Claire McCaskill advocate for forcing people out of restaurants. She's from Missouri. She's a middle American. She's not into that kind of West Coast, East Coast melee stuff. But she is a gun grabber. She does support Planned Parenthood, even though she says she's a practicing Catholic. So here she is. It's number one.
Point. You have this radio ad out now that says at one point in an exchange, she's not one of these crazy Democrats.
Claire's not afraid to stand up against her own party. Yep, and Claire's not one of those crazy Democrats.
Who's the crazy Democrat?
The crazy Democrats are people who walk in restaurants and scream in elected officials' faces. The crazy Democrats are, we have a state senator here in Missouri that actually advocated for the assassination of President Trump. That's a crazy Democrat. I don't do those things. I am not somebody who thinks that we should ever be uncivil. I think what most Missourians want is for us to listen to each other, figure out where we can compromise, not scream in each other's faces, not call each other names. So I'm really talking about civility here. I'm talking about being polite, having good manners.
Well, just to be clear, there's not another crazy Democrat in the Senate.
Well, I would say this. I would not call my colleagues crazy, but Elizabeth Warren sure went after me when I advocated tooling back some of the regulations for small banks and credit unions.
So you see what she's doing there? She's trying to separate herself off from Elizabeth Warren because Elizabeth Warren is still reeling from her announcement that she's an Indian when she's the least Indian white lady in America. She's less Indian than me, and I'm black. It's like she's way less Indian than me. But, I mean, other white people have way more Indian than she has. And not by little, by a ton. So she's trying to figure out how to work her way back from that. And Claire McCaskill's kicking her while she's down. Now, the person she's referring to, the crazy state senator who called for the assassination of Donald Trump, she almost lost her seat. She was almost recalled by the Republicans. Maria Chappelle Nadal. I wrote about this. She actually did this horrible, it was a Facebook post, and she called for the assassination of Donald Trump. And at the time, it was so shocking that Republicans were really going to recall her, and she had to go around and make nice with the Republicans, which, to her credit, she has on many occasions crossed the aisle from her hardcore Democrat leanings to advocate for school choice for people in her district because the Republicans were offering options for people who are in failing school districts. Since Claire McCaskill made that statement you just heard, Maria Chappelle Nadal has come out swinging with profanity on Twitter, assaulting Claire McCaskill verbally on this online social media giant, profane, angry tweets. She says they're out to get Claire. They don't want to vote for her. The black community doesn't support her anymore. You know what? I would say I'm back here with my popcorn, but I live in Missouri and she needs to go. Sorry. You know. So the spoils. Anyway, that's the music. Good evening from the Heartland. If you're sticking with us, there's onenewsnow.com. News and information up next. God bless.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand. for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. The suspect in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting has been indicted by a federal grand jury. The indictment charges Robert Bowers with 44 counts, including hate crimes. Federal prosecutors have previously indicated they plan to seek the death penalty. Authorities say Bowers opened fire in the Tree of Life synagogue on Saturday, killing 11 and wounding 6, including 4 police officers. Democrats and Republicans continue to weigh in on President Trump's plan to sign an executive order that would end birthright citizenship for a child born in the U.S. to illegal immigrants. Here's Fox's Mike Emanuel.
Republican leaders on Capitol Hill say addressing this issue should be done by the legislative branch, by lawmakers. House Speaker Paul Ryan said this is not something a president can do on his own. Democrats are not impressed. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine saying, quote, "The U.S. presidency is not a dictatorship. Patriotic Americans must rally to defeat the president's unprecedented attempt to rewrite the Constitution on his own." House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi suggests this is part of a pattern with this president, warning about a caravan that is more than 1,000 miles away, putting troops on the border. And Pelosi suggests this move is beyond President Trump's authority.
Meanwhile, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are planning a meeting in Paris next week to discuss a wide range of topics. Speaking in Washington, D.C. today, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton shed some light on the anticipated meeting.
The reason that he has sent me twice to Moscow and to meet with my counterpart on other occasions is that he thinks that despite all the political dust in the air in this country about interference and collusion and so on, that it's important to have sustained diplomatic engagement with them. That's the reason he went to Helsinki. That's the reason we're still talking about it. And there are a lot of issues to discuss. The INF Treaty is certainly one of them. We have other arms control issues, but we've got their behavior in the Middle East.
The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, initially signed back in 1987, eliminated operational and non-operational medium to short-range missiles. Earlier in October, President Trump suggested that the U.S. would withdraw from the treaty due to Russia violating its terms of agreement. The nearly decade-long wait is over for Asiya Bibi, as the Christian mother of 5 has been acquitted of a blasphemy conviction in Pakistan. AFN's Bill Bumpus reports.
In exonerating Bibi, the Supreme Court of Pakistan rendered the death sentence against her null and void. In celebrating the victory, International Christian Concerns William Stark said the 3-judge bench went beyond just issuing a verdict.
The Supreme Court actually wrote a 56-page decision, which hopefully will lay down some precedent that will help kind of close in the blasphemy laws a little bit and help it not to be abused so much, which we should very much applaud the Supreme Court for doing that. They didn't have to. They could have just said, oh, she's not guilty, not explain why, and get her out. Instead, they took the brave step of writing an actual precedent on this issue, which has been so highly sensitive in a place like Pakistan.
Stark tells AFN it's a time for sober celebration as they pray for Bibi's transition from prison to a safe location in another country to be reunited with her family. He adds that Bibi's lawyer, a Muslim, will probably have to leave the country for safety reasons. I'm Bill Bumpus.
It's not fake news. A vegetarian food maker has asked a federal judge to issue a preliminary injunction against a Missouri law that makes it a misdemeanor to promote products as quote-unquote meat that aren't made from livestock or poultry. The Oregon-based Tofurkey Company claims the Missouri law infringes on its constitutional free speech rights to use product labels such as veggie burgers, vegetarian ham roast, and chorizo-style sausage. In final news this hour, more than 7 million adults plan to dress like a witch for Halloween, the top costume choice for grown-ups this year. And that's according to a new survey from the National Retail Federation. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Now, how ridiculous. We're the only country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits. It's ridiculous, and it has to end.
It is possible to believe in responsible gun ownership and to believe that there should be regulations on that. Anthony Scalia said that.
On Tuesday, we also saw the highest consumer confidence numbers that we have seen since the year 2000. Tuesday is coming quickly. Let's keep America and the American economy moving forward, not backwards.
I'm not like other politicians. You've seen what happens. I've kept my promises.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the show. So I had someone ask in DMs how we handle Halloween, and noticing that I haven't been saying Happy Halloween or anything today on the show or yesterday, and you're not going to hear me do that because we don't celebrate Halloween. And so before some crazed, unhinged Halloween supporter says, "What are you, some kind of fundamentalist or Jehovah's Witness?" No, you guys know that I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm not in any way what I would call a fundamentalist. If fundamentalist means to use some kind of, irrational practice of a religion. In fact, I find it quite rational to stay away from the practice of Halloween. Now, we have on occasion taken our children to, to church for fall festival when they were smaller, but they have, grown up in a household where we just don't celebrate Halloween. Now, for me, that's the way I grew up. My parents didn't celebrate Halloween. I didn't celebrate it as a kid. I never went trick-or-treating. I never did any of that stuff. My parents would buy my sister and I a basket of candy. We didn't put out decorations. My mom was really great with, arranging pumpkins and fall leaves and things like that, but not anything that would be construed as like jack-o'-lanterns or carving pumpkins or anything like that. And of course, being of the permanent tan, we usually had sweet potato pie. And then as an adult, I got into eating pumpkin pie. And so now we do both at Thanksgiving. We have the, both pies present because my husband loves the sweet potato, as do I, and the kids love both as well. So, and I actually have a really good recipe that I got from my husband's mom, and I use her recipe. That's now my recipe. So to answer it quite simply, we just don't practice Halloween. Now, I don't judge people who do. I'm not one of those people who post on Facebook every Halloween about how if you're celebrating Halloween, you're worshiping the devil or anything like that. I've come to a place where I find it kind of annoying, and I've gotten past it because the practice of Halloween is actually in some ways bigger than Thanksgiving. People have almost as many or more celebrations surrounding Halloween than they do for Thanksgiving. And I think part of it is because people really, really enjoy dressing up in costumes. Now, my husband and I have been to costume parties before. We've definitely gone to Mardi Gras parties before. When we were, younger in our kids' school, the parents would have a Mardi Gras party for just the parents, and we would go and we would dress up. I was Tyra Banks one time. My husband was Tyra Banks' boyfriend. He actually had a little lapel that said Tyra Banks' boyfriend, and I had a wig on and, doing my best. And so it's not that we're against, dressing up as characters or costumes or anything like that, but I feel like the practice of Halloween, in some communities, it is above board and it's so family oriented and it's so fun. And in other places, it's all about scariness, and it really has almost a demonic tinge to it. And so rather than offending people who enjoy the practice of Halloween or enjoy the holiday, I say more power to you. If you don't enjoy it like we do and you don't celebrate it, you just give your kids some candy and move on, or you don't give them any candy, more power to you too. I'm out of the phase where I feel like I need to convince anybody else about what they should do with it. I've read quite a bit. My husband was happy to adopt the same thing that we did in my family. In other areas, I do the same thing he did in his family, like the gumbo tradition at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I make a mean pot of gumbo. It's amazing. No chicken, just vegetables and seafood. It's awesome. But that's a whole nother holiday that we can talk about. So that's to answer, just in case you're wondering why I don't have on some kind of like headgear for Halloween. Headgear starts coming out after this. We'll have the 25 days of headbands in December, starting on December 1st, as we always have. And I'm happy to share about that, but it's just not. I don't see it as a big deal unless it's a big deal for you. Remember what the Bible says about that. You know, if you feel like it's a sin for you, then by all means abstain. If you feel like it's not a sin for you and you haven't been convicted by the Holy Spirit about it, then, you know, you go forward remembering that your Christian conduct is an example for everyone around you. And we all come to our different places about these American holidays. So that's the programming note for that. So what do we have on this hour for the show? Well, I'll tell you. We're going to be talking about the Democrats being able to say anything they want to about black folk and get away with it. And no, I'm not talking about Hillary Clinton. I know you're thinking you covered that. I did, but I have more for you. And then we have Sink Henderson, writer for HBO's The Newsroom, author of Sit Down and Shut Up, How Discipline Can Set Students Free. How's that for a title? We're going to talk to Henderson up next. And then we are also going to be listening to a little bit of audio about our consumer confidence and the economy. Now, I promised you, and it's amazing how quickly the time flies on radio. Let's get into a little bit of the awesomeness of the president's accomplishments. So, you know what I love? I love a person who delivers on what they've promised. And we all, you know, we all have room to work on in this area, but we don't expect the person who's the commander-in-chief to have a big problem with delivering on promises. And, you know, blessings for us. Thanks be to God that we have a president who is at least working his hardest to accomplish what he promised. So we're talking about 173 major wins, but 289 accomplishments in 18 categories. So I promised I would post this. I will. And I also want to give you just the highlights. Now, there was last year, at the end of year one of the president's tenure, a list of 81 major Trump achievements and 11 Obama legacy items that have been repealed. We've already gone over that information. Now we're to the new stuff. So, first of all, there have been some disappointments. The failure to replace Obamacare, the failure to fund a big infrastructure plan, which I don't know. I kind of feel like when we do the infrastructure stuff, we end up, it's basically a big pork barrel spending package. And you see some of the infrastructure come to fruition, but for the most part, it's just like throwing billions of dollars up in the air, and some people get rich and everybody else is wondering what just happened. And of course, not building the border wall in the first year. We're at year 2 now. We still don't have a fully, completed border wall. That's a disappointment. But the president and his cabinet are correct that he has had a distinct lack of coverage over his accomplishments. And so I'm here to right that wrong as often as I can. In fact, I'll put it this way. In his first 2 years, the president has had a remarkable amount of success in promise keeping. In economic growth, we have 4.2% is the actual number of GDP growth in the second quarter of 2018. Those are numbers we were told would never return. For the first time in more than a decade, growth is projected to exceed 3% over the calendar year. That's you got to give claps for that. For jobs, 4 million new jobs created since the election and more than 3.5 million since the president took office. More Americans are employed now than ever before in the history of this country. Jobless claims are at the lowest level in nearly 50 years. That's longer than I've been alive and probably longer than most of y'all have been alive. Job openings are at an all-time high. Unemployment claims are at a 50-year low. And minority unemployment rates have all recently reached record lows. Female unemployment dropped to 3.6% in May of 2018, the lowest number since 1953. I'm going to skip ahead to American income. The median household income, which I quote that number quite a bit on here, it was $56,000 median household income for a family of 4. It is now $61,372 median household income for a family of 4 in 2017. That means that number could be even higher for this year, but we're still in 2018, so we won't know that until next year. Paychecks rose by 3.3% in 2016 and 2017, the most in a decade. Remember, we've had people on who said that can happen. It's happening. The Council of Economic Advisors found that real wage compensation has grown by 1.4% over the past year, and some 3.9 million Americans have come off of food stamps since the 2016 election. Skipping ahead to American optimism, which we will cover in the third segment of this hour, NFIB's Small Business Optimism Index broke a 35-year-old record in the month of August. SurveyMonkey/CNBC's Small Business Confidence Survey for quarter 3 of 2018 matched its all-time high. These are things that could be reported in the media without being a fan of the president, to simply acknowledge that some of the things that he promised and is working on are having an impact for the lives of Americans. Consumer confidence is at an 18-year high, and 12% of Americans rate the economy as the most significant problem facing our country, which is the lowest level of people having that concern on record. Skipping ahead to business, over $450 billion has already poured back into the U.S., including more than $300 billion in the first quarter of 2018. Remember, Obama said those dollars couldn't come back here. They would never come back here. Business people didn't want to talk about repatriating their dollars. They're back. They're back because the taxes are so low now. It makes sense to bring those dollars into the U.S. so that they can put them to work in our economy. That in and of itself is enough to get a standing ovation from every one of those flunkies over at those news organizations, but you won't see it there, but you'll hear it here. And steel and aluminum producers are reopening plants across this country. More things that we were told could never happen. The Dow has hit record highs 70 times in 2017 alone, the most ever recorded in 1 year. If you're not in the market, get in the market. If you're not doing retirement savings, do it. Not because you plan to retire to some beach somewhere to wait for the Lord's return, but because saving and being prudent with your money is wise, and God wants us to save and invest our money. Deregulation. The president achieved massive deregulation at a rapid pace. He completed 22 deregulatory actions for every one new regulatory action during his first year in office. He signed legislation to roll back costly and harmful provisions of Dodd-Frank, bringing relief to credit unions and community and regional banks, which that's you and me, tax-paying listeners who live in communities with credit unions. We deserve that relief. Our credit unions deserve that relief, and it's a good thing for him to do from his business expertise. That's what the president brought to us there. Moving ahead to tax cuts, I've covered this so much on the show. Suffice it to say, the tax reform package is one of his signature legacy achievements. We need to make those cuts permanent. And moving ahead to worker development, the president established a National Council on the American Worker to develop a national strategy for training and retraining America's workers for high-demand industries. Domestic infrastructure, he proposed an infrastructure plan that would utilize $200 billion in federal funds to spur at least $1.5 trillion in infrastructure investment across the country. That has not yet come to fruition, but it's a plan. In healthcare, he signed the right to try legislation, expanding healthcare options for terminally ill patients, and so many other things, or at least 20 bullet points under that subject heading. Combating opioids, he chaired a meeting of the 73rd General Session of the UN to discuss the worldwide drug problem with international leaders, and he has started a new initiative to stop the opioid abuse that is roiling the country. Law and order, more U.S. Circuit judges have been confirmed in the first year in office than ever before. He confirmed more than 24 U.S. Circuit Court judges. He followed through on the promise to nominate judges to the Supreme Court who would adhere to the Constitution. He has effectively shifted the court to the right for the foreseeable future, and he possibly could have 2 more appointments before 2020. And he established a task force to reduce crime and restore public safety in communities, signed an executive order to focus more federal resources on dismantling transnational criminal organizations such as drug cartels, and so much more. Other subject headings on which the president has had numerous accomplishments and promises kept are border security and immigration, trade, energy, foreign policy, defense, veterans affairs, and so much more. I can't get it all to you on this radio program, but suffice it to say, 289 accomplishments, promises made, promises kept. I'm happy to report that. If he had not done that, I would be castigating him for it. I don't sit here as a representative of the Trump administration, although I'm happy to report I have media credentials for the rally that's in Columbia, Missouri. More on that as things develop. So right now we have just a few seconds left in this segment. I didn't get to my 2 audio bits, but we'll do that in the 3rd segment because we have Sink Henderson, a writer for HBO's The Newsroom, coming on in the next segment. I think this is an important interview about discipline and students, and it's even more interesting to have it coming from someone out of Hollywood. So I can't wait to have that right after this. You stay there. Get your drinks. Look what I got. I got a new, if you're watching the live stream, look at my new sippy cup. It's a water cup, but it has a plastic straw. supposed to be friendly to the environment, but I just like the color and also that it keeps drinks cold. Okay, yeah. We'll be back with more after this. Stay there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
What does it take for normal people to start slaughtering others? A commentary in the Jerusalem Post with the title The Genocide Mechanism showed how demonization could lead to genocide. The writer talked about a very specific kind of demonization, and the example he used was Rwanda. In 1994, the majority Hutu population was able to massacre some 800,000 Tutsis. The violence was unimaginable. Neighbors slaughtering neighbors, mostly with machetes. The estimates are about 9,000 men, women, and children were slaughtered every day. How does something so awful happen? Well, the answer is demonization. The Hutus were taught that the Tutsis were cockroaches and snakes. Tutsi women were portrayed as cunning seductresses who used beauty and sexual powers to conquer the Hutus. There were also warnings on the radio that the Tutsis were about to attack them, so they needed to attack first to protect themselves. Step 1 was to dehumanize the enemy with all sorts of false statements. Step 2 was to present a clear danger. Then you merely need to convince people that they need to act in their own self-defense. The commentary explains how this type of demonization has been used by Hamas and the Palestinian Authority to describe Jews as loathsome and dangerous animals. Could something like this happen in this country? We would hope not. But you do see some similarities. Look at how the left portrays President Trump, Republican members of Congress, and even conservative speakers on college campus. They are the equivalent of Hitler. They're not worthy of any respect and represent a clear and present danger to various sectors of society. They want to put people in detainment camps and even march them off to gas chambers. This is the reminder that hateful words and demonization can lead to horrific acts against other human beings. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Graceworks Pictures, Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather. Rated PG-13. Now playing. IndivisibleMovie.com.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Also, pray for me. I've been invited to go on a midterm election panel on MSNBC. You guys, Al Sharpton. I've gotten an invitation to go on the show. I know. I must be looking for some fun. As I said yes. So that'll be in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about welcoming our next guest. And please forgive me. I may be pronouncing your name incorrectly. And if I am, I want to be corrected so that I can have the proper pronunciation. Sink Henderson, writer for HBO's The Newsroom, author of Sit Down and Shut Up, How Discipline Can Set Students Free. Am I right? Wrong? What am I doing?
Sink Henderson.
Sink. Okay, Sink. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Hey, no worries. As I told your producer, we're on different sides politically. I'm a liberal Democrat. You're conservative, but I think there's some common points for all of us to agree on and come together and talk about public schools and that kind of thing.
Well, and I'm excited about chatting with you about this subject because I'm a former elected school board member. I served as vice president and secretary on our local board of education, and I was elected to that board. I also served an appointment there. I volunteered at every level of the district, and I was really just, it wasn't a partisan issue for me when our kids were in public school. And so when I see the title of your book, Sit Down and Shut Up, How Discipline Can Set Students Free, you know I was like, thank you, Demetrius. I'm looking forward to this. So tell us about the book. Why'd you write it?
Well, as you said, I'm a writer. I'm a bit of a bum with my writing habits, to be honest. If it were up to me, I'd be up to 4 in the morning. So a friend of mine had a charter school, and my parents were educators, and they said, you should come and substitute, it would give you a way to organize your day and that kind of thing. So I did it, and on my first day, man, this kid called me, as they say in the South, everything but a child of God, and just came at me like nobody's business. And I kicked him out of class, sent him out with this campus aide, and about 10 minutes later, he came back into my class with a note saying, okay to return to class. There was no detention, no suspension, no call home. And this was kind of commonplace, but I taught in some tough schools, I'll just say that. And I thought, as I went on with but at the same time, so that was maybe my first period. But later in the day, I had a few terrific experiences. So I'm still very committed to education and public education. But I also thought there's a story here about what's really going on in these really disadvantaged, sort of suffering, underserved schools. And it's kind of a bold thesis, which is that it's not the teachers, it's the kids. And I sort of unraveled really what was going on. I'll just tell you briefly. And as an African-American, I think it's important to say it's not just black inner-city kids. It's not just poor black kids. It's poor white kids in the Midwest, too. There's a quote from this book, Hillbilly Elegy, which I'm sure you've heard of.
I've read it. It's an amazing book. I cried and cried and cried. Oh, my goodness.
And I say every black person, liberal, conservative, needs to read that book.
I agree with you.
Because we are so often the ones that are put out front as the ones who are on, cheating welfare and poor and not doing well and that kind of thing. And it really is a terrible thing to say maybe, but it's not a race thing.
No, it's not.
Class, the loss of jobs, other reasons, it affects everybody.
Poverty does not respect melanin content. Poverty is poverty, and the ramifications of it are similar no matter what the ethnic background. I want to ask you, when you said you were subbing at first, what age group was that?
I was everywhere, but mainly middle school and high school. So that was the focus. So, and I'll tell you the thing that told me there was a book here is later on at that same school, about a week later, a teacher who had gone to school there as an undergraduate and as a high school student said, the school was always tough. But the students used to fight each other. Now they fight the teacher. And I was like, wow, that's so true. I have cousins who are gang members. They never cursed at their teacher. They never went off on their teacher. And I couldn't figure out why that shift had happened, why kids went from sort of, cursing each other out, fighting each other, to now doing that with the teacher. And I discovered it shocking. I was coming home one day, driving in my car. Jay-Z came on the radio, the husband of Beyonce, and the interviewer asked him, what was the impact of crack cocaine coming into your neighborhood? And he said the most stunning thing, something I never heard, not violence, not more police, not more murders. He said it destroyed the authority figure. And I was like, what is he talking about? So I started to research it, and I listened to him, and crack cocaine was essentially a child's economy. Because of the mandatory drug sentences that were put down on drug users and drug sellers, they gave the drugs to kids to sell. So you had kids as young as 9 or 10 making money, and it was the only economic game in town because all the jobs had fled the inner city. And so you had crack cocaine was so powerful, like the opioid crisis now, that it was so powerful. You had the adults who were essentially cracked out zombies chasing this high. And you had kids selling to them and paying their mama's light bill. And there are economists who said you cannot underestimate the impact of crack cocaine on poor inner city neighborhoods. It swept through those neighborhoods like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And we look at what's going on with the opioid crisis, and this is why I say it's a universal thing. The opioid crisis in the Midwest with these poor white areas where jobs have fled, and they're going through the same thing. Those those neighborhoods are being destroyed by opioids and joblessness and the hopelessness that comes with that. And so that was the beginning of the book. And then I just went on and learned so much about the impact of fatherlessness, about the fact that, you know, a lot of schools won't suspend kids now. And so the problem I find is on the left, on the right, well, say on the left only wants to deal with the source. So you can't suspend kids if there's poverty. You can't discipline kids if they come from a broken home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's ridiculous. But unfortunately, the right sometimes only wants to do the punish. You got to deal with the source, and you got to deal with the symptom. And the book tries to talk about all of that and just say, at the end of the day, if these kids aren't behaving white, black, rich, poor, they're not going to get anywhere in life, and that's just it.
Wow. Okay, so you just unpacked that beautifully, and I gotta commend you for, because I accept your acknowledgement that we're on different ends of the political spectrum, but the indictment that you just laid down, that people on the right tend to be more law and order. It's like, you know, the rule is the rule. You did the crime, you do the time. And then on the left, it tends to be more, well, you have disadvantages in your background, and because of those, you shouldn't reap the repercussions of your actions. And the answer is somewhere in the middle, because 100%. As parents, parents don't, I've no time in our parenting journey, my husband and I, have we ever been strictly law and order or strictly, well, you know, we made you stay up last night traveling home from vacation, so today you don't have to do anything that we tell you to do. We've never been on those extremes. We've always been in the middle where, you know, your actions and your consequences are going to match what you've done, but there's always some mercy there, because we know these are people and they're going to improve over time with the proper direction. So can you give us any insight into what you're advocating for this? It's a new paradigm. Let's face it, Cinque, this is not what's happening in a lot of these buildings, that there's a middle ground where kids are punished, but they also know that people care for them. What does that look like?
I'll say a couple things, and you have to, you know, hopefully your readers will take a look at the book. It's a real humane look, but also a grown-up. You know, I'm an adult now, so kids can't just run around and do what they want. I would say there are a couple of things. There are no immediate sort of short-term solutions. For people, banning suspensions, bad idea. Got to be able to draw a line and say, you went too far today, go home and bring your mom, and come back when your mom is with you. But if I would say one very important thing, for boys especially, is more male teachers. The teaching force is 80% in public schools, 80% women, 80% female. That is really difficult for boys, black or white, who grow up without fathers in their home. They need those surrogate father figures, and they really need them. There's a chapter in the book that's, I think, one of the best chapters, is that I have this theory about what the real role of fathers in a boy's life. I don't know. I know we're probably running short on time, but
no, we still have a few minutes. You please expound. This is good.
Quickly. I was listening to some middle school kids talk, and one boy was like, you know, I'm really worried about seeing my dad this weekend, because when he gets mad, he punches me in the chest and knocks the wind out of me, right? And then another kid was like, yeah, me too. And I was listening. I was smiling, because I actually knew that they were bragging about the strength of their dads, right?
Oh.
And then there was this older black guy on Twitter who said, fellas, what happened to you when you first, stepped to or tested the father figure in your life? And there was hysterical responses. This guy, I was 13, I was bigger than my dad, and I tell you something slick, I woke up on my back with his foot on my chest, but he's still my best friend. All these hysterical stories about these boys testing their dad, and their dad saying, I'm in charge here. And what I realize is that boys who grow up without fathers, particularly in neighborhoods where there are not fathers, every boy challenges the adult in their life, right? But if you challenge your mom and you're 13 and you realize you're stronger than your mom, bigger than your mom, faster than your mom, in your brain you realize that you can in some way hurt or kill your mom, you think you're an adult. But when you have a dad and you try to step to him and he's 13 and he pulls you up by the side of your neck, by the side of your collar, and says, who are you talking to? It's a whole nother situation for you. You realize, oh, maybe I'm still just a kid and I need to get in line. And so I realized the actual physical presence of a father, just that presence, because when you are surged with, I did it. When I was big and I had hormones, I stepped to my dad and he put me back in my place with a quickness. But he did it with love. When boys grow up without dads in these neighborhoods where there are not dads, they think they're men before they are. And that physical presence cannot be, and I'm a liberal,
Thank you for saying that, because one of the things that I think is so heartbreaking is that you can afford to have these kind of really nouveau riche ideas about gender when you come from a two-parent household, and generationally speaking, you've never even maybe had a divorce in your family, or if there was divorce, there was immediate remarriage
really quickly.
Yeah, really quickly.
Plenty of spouses. Yep.
And never any economic malaise that presented itself as a result of that. When you have that in your just the history that you can remember for the foreseeable past, you can say things like gender.
Everybody in your family's married.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you're going to marry somebody and live a very traditional life. You can say things like gender doesn't matter. But for our inner city residents where, it's a life or death issue for these boys. Because as you said, when you first realize, hey, I'm pretty strong. I think I'm stronger than my mom. Well, that's never happened at our house. But I have had our son kind of challenge my authority before. And instead of having to handle it myself, I can just say to him, I think when we talk about this with your father, you're going to have a different understanding. And sometimes just that statement.
That matters. And it doesn't matter whether you're a liberal or conservative. That stuff matters. And so because one of the, if you don't have it, that's why those male teachers matter, particularly elementary school, middle school, and high school too, but they're not enough in elementary. That male presence, aside from role modeling, aside from the love, that strong presence of someone who, for a boy, you got to be 20 before you can really test your dad. And by that time, you don't want to test it because you're mature enough to know better. So that's one quick solution. I also think we need to bring back reform schools, but not make them little mini jails like they used to be. You used to just throw kids out, put them in these reform schools, and they were just hellholes, excuse my language. There really need to be places where kids really can learn and have second chances. There's some great reform schools. Call them alternative schools, change the name of them. They can't just be places to punish. They have to be places where kids can learn shop, can learn home ec, can learn to work with their hands, and also learn to control their rage, control their emotions, control their, have impulse control. So those are just right off the bat what I would say are two of the recommendations just from my year. And it's so important, as I said, for black kids, for white kids, for poor kids, for fatherless kids. It could not be more important. I really hope that, there's so much division. I'm obviously a liberal, not, Democrat, but there's so much that we can, I think, come together on this conversation of education and where it's important in all of kids' development.
Well, I will close out by saying this. First of all, thank you again so much, Cinque Henderson, for coming on the show. You came on knowing that we would not be politically aligned, but on this particular subject, and I believe others. I believe there really are places where we can sit down and have agreements.
I agree.
And conversation, especially coming from your informed perspective where you've been on the ground there. So you're coming from a place of it really doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum the solution comes from. What matters is that we get these solutions out there so that kids can really flourish regardless of where they're coming from, their home life, et cetera. And the school place, the school building is, kids spend more time at school than they do awake at home.
Absolutely.
And that is where we can really solve some problems. And I have to say, I respect you for bucking the current trend on, saying gender isn't important. The fact is, it is super important. And the groups that are most impacted by its lack of evidence are the ones who are least considered by those who really are, they find this whole gender thing to be super cool and in vogue and you have to follow the rules, but they're not impacted by the negative side effects. I want to give everybody the website. It's cinquehenderson.com and it's CINQUE Henderson.com. And I'm on the website.
Sit down and shut up.
Yes.
Name.
Yes.
Just trying, the more it gets out there, the more there'll be a conversation about this. I'm hoping people who have read it have really positively responded to it. So I'm hoping people are able to pick it up.
Well, this is what I'm doing. So I just already sent Demetrius a text message saying that we hope to have you back and that I'm recommending your book to my book club. It's a conservative women's book club. So
no worries.
Yeah, but you know what? We love reading.
You want me to come on and talk to them? There's actually a wonderful, beautiful religious moment, and I'm actually the son of a preacher. I think I'll have you talk to your book club if you want me to.
You better believe we're going to be reaching out because we love a good guest speaker, and we have the space to have you in and have a good sized group of women listen to your chat. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. Thank you for this good work that you're doing. and for being willing to have conversations across the aisle. We need it, and you're out there. It's wonderful to have you on the show. Hope to speak to you again. Have a fantastic evening. Cinque Henderson.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. You guys take care.
All right. Take care. That was fantastic. We'll be back with more. If you'd like to call in, it's 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Back with more right after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Blount County School District Superintendent Rodney Green caved to the Freedom from Religion jihadis' complaint about student-led prayer at football games, and parents immediately fought back. Students were using the school's public announcement system to broadcast the short prayer, and the Freedom from Fun folks felt that made it an endorsement. Instead of consulting parents, the decision was made after consulting attorneys. At the next game, aggravated moms and dads stood and said the Lord's Prayer in unison without the assistance of a PA system. The next week, the spirit of capitalism took over, and the parents made T-shirts with the Lord's Prayer on them and sold those at a breakneck pace. And the shirts are cute, stylish even. 2 takeaways here. First off, if taxpayers pay your salary, consult with them before making huge changes, especially if prompted by the Freedom from Fun people. Secondly, and ultimately, it's up to us to keep our religious freedom. Don't forget it. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
American Family Radio.
Samaritan's Purse.
And your family.
Together, we can bring good news and great joy to needy children.
Simply pack an Operation Christmas Child shoebox with toys, school supplies, and hygiene items. Then, drop off your shoebox gift during National Collection Week.
Visit AFR.net, click the Operation Christmas Child banner, and then get packing.
You're not singing to your neighbor. You're not singing to your friends. You're not singing to the choir.
Dr. Tony Evans says that when worship isn't focused on God, it isn't worship.
He's faithful, consistent, worthy of your worship. Somebody ought to bless that name.
A look at taking our faith more seriously, starting with worship, this week on The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans.
America's election headquarters.
We are here to announce another bold and historic action to bring down the price of prescription drugs.
Amidst the October surprises of Kavanaugh, the Caravan, and the pipe bomber, the president's announcement to bring down drug prices is testament to how health care and Obamacare remain top of mind for many voters. The ACA's popularity is at an all-time high, with 54% of likely voters rating it favorably. Democrats are spending millions in ads to make that point.
I support the Affordable Care Act.
Polling data on Obamacare has also moved many Republicans to the left.
I'm Josh Hawley. I support forcing insurance companies to cover all pre-existing conditions.
No matter who gains control of Congress in November, the debate over Obamacare may intensify. Proof of that old Washington adage that it is easier to give than to take away. In Washington, Doug McElway, Fox News.
This is Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We want everybody to have a chance in Indiana and in America. And my offices reflect that, both on the campaign side and on the Senate side. Our state director is Indian American, but he does an amazing job. Our director of all constituent services, she's African American, but she does an even more incredible job than you could ever imagine. It isn't their race or their religion, it's the incredible person that they are. But at the same time, they have to have a chance. They have to have an opportunity. And that's my responsibility, and I've done it in every office I've had, and I've done it in every campaign I've had, because my campaigns and our Senate office should reflect the face of Indiana.
So only a Democrat could get away with saying that they have employed someone who's a minority, but they're doing a good job in spite of that. So the inference there is that the person that is employed by him is operating at expectation levels in spite of their inherent deficiency, which is that they are a minority. just imagine. Mitt Romney said we have binders full of women. In other words, binders full of female candidates because we were so intent on hiring women and making sure that our staff reflected the population that we had binders that only had female candidates in it. The liberal media took binders full of women and beat him over the head with it. This man just said he has an Indian American and a Black American on staff in leadership positions, and they're doing well in spite of their race. Where do we even find these people? It's Donnelly. He's a Democrat running for office. Some of my staff are minorities, but they do an amazing job. You know, after listening to Hillary Clinton talk, you'd think he would have maybe he didn't hear what she said. You know, maybe he didn't hear the joke. Maybe it just doesn't matter because he's a Democrat and he can say anything he wants to. Let's go to the phones real quick before we pivot over to Stacey Abrams' support for banning AR-15s. We got Joy in Colorado. Joy, thank you for calling the show today.
Hi, Stacey. I just wanted to, yesterday we had the young lady that was calling about immigration and how she was, saying we should, get folks to come in. She was hiring people and bringing in a lot of, the immigrant workers because there were Americans that didn't want to do the job. And I work with folks that are here in Colorado looking for jobs and homeless people that are looking for jobs because they couldn't find jobs. And I just totally disagreed with her stance on the way she was hiring people. I've been through Garden City, Kansas, where they are doing a lot of the hiring of immigrants, and they're not really assimilating into American way of living. And I just, if you go into the high schools, they have these, they have to do all these multiple translations. They have to get translators. And I was like, where is this lady doing her study?
I don't know.
Not coming into America, It
was just such a mess, wasn't it?
It's just sad listening to her.
It was. And Joy, I felt like she gave up on minority Americans. Like her attitude was they don't want to work or they're not good employees. They don't show up. And so that's a blanket statement about all minority employees. And you're working in the field as well. I don't know where she got her data, but I know what I'm reading is that Americans want to work. And when the immigrants are deported or at least apprehended, then those job openings are filled by Americans. And a lot of them are Black.
Exactly. And I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many people will come to my office and be like, Miss Joy, how can I get a job? They were like, I will do anything. I mean, some folks had even some kind of degree, associate's degree, but they just could not find jobs. And they were just like, where can I work? I will take any kind of work. And they weren't able to find any kind of jobs. And I was like, man, if I could call up and have networks of people in different states and just be like, hey, can you hire this person? I will bust them to you. Because these were people that were just so willing to work.
I know it.
They were just willing to uproot their families and just get a job.
I know it. I know you're telling the truth.
So that's all I had to say about this lady. She was off. She was just off.
Thank you.
Data and on her work. So that was just what I wanted to say about her.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you. Thank you for your real world experience and for sharing that here on the show. I really was kind of ticked off when I got off the show yesterday chatting with Linda Chavez. And the reason I was so upset about it is because, I just expect people to be above board if they're going to be, I'm going to need you to, first of all, she was interrupting and I thought that was kind of rude, but whatever. I'm going to need you to be able to deal in more than just, she said she had these studies that prove that they're assimilating. Well, we have the data from the American schools across the country, the K through 12 educational facilities that, yeah, these kids are being taught English at school, but it's not assimilating at home because the parents aren't learning English and the parents are working off books and they're working for employers that are happy to have them work off book because they don't have to pay the Social Security and employment taxes. You know, every employer is responsible for paying that for you when they hire you, which is they pay you a certain amount, and some of that money goes straight to the government for your Social Security, and some of it goes for employment tax, and then, you know, you reconcile that at the end of the year. And if you're operating outside the system, you're saving a lot of money as an employer. That's not right. People shouldn't be able to cheat at hiring people who are here and they're willing to work for a lot less. The other thing that Linda never addressed was the assertion that these illegal immigrants lower the wage for everyone else. They lower the wage. So the minimum wage can be $7.25, but if you've got 10,000 people in your city, because you're a sanctuary city, who are willing to work for $5 an hour off book, they don't need medical benefits, and you don't have to pay employment tax for them, and they don't want 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch. They don't know they're owed that. They're not going to get up and use the bathroom. They're not checking their phones. And I know there's this thing about people saying, well, you know, Americans are so entitled. Yeah, we're Americans. Miss me with your talk about us being entitled. How about you get out there and you offer some incentives for people to come to work? How about you get creative with your employment and make some offers to people, and you run your business above board? You will make money in this country. You know, if you don't like the way the regulations are squashing your opportunities, vote for somebody who will have less regulations for you, but don't blame Americans. So, yeah, there are bad employees out there who are Americans, but there are great employees out there, and there are plenty of desperate people who see this new economy, and they've made mistakes, but they deserve another chance. And American employers should not be able to skip over them and refuse to employ them because they've got cheap labor just sitting out there desperate for anything they can get. $5 a day here. Did you hear that audio clip of the man? He's in the Caravan, the horde of invaders, and the Fox News interviewer said, hey, you know, what are you doing? And he said, I'm actually opting to stay here in Mexico. He said, oh, okay, so you're taking the asylum. He said, yep, they're going to give me a worker card, and they're going to give me medical insurance. They're going to help me find a place to stay. And then he said, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to work here for a year, and in a year I should be able to make $3,300 so I can pay a coyote to get me into the country illegally, because I can see now that my asylum claim won't be honored. That's what he told the Fox News interviewer. What sticks out about that to me is obviously the guy is totally lawless. He doesn't care anything about our laws. But second of all, he's going to work for a whole year to make $3,300 when he could come to America and make $3,300 in 2 or 3 months, or maybe even less than that, working on construction or something like that. There's wrong actors on both sides of this. The employers, some of them are Republicans, but they like the cheap labor. The Democrats, they want the votes. The people themselves who want to come here, they don't care what our laws are. They just want to make a living. It's a bad thing, and it needs to be shut down. You know, there's been some assertions that the guest yesterday that she talked down to me. Well, you know, that doesn't bother me, and the reason why is because people usually assume this high and mighty, I was doing civil rights marches before you were born. What relevance does that have now? If we were going to use that same logic, the Reverend Jesse Jackson was marching for civil rights and also advocating against abortion, but now he advocates for abortion. So do we go with the old guy, or do we go with what we're seeing now? I don't care what you did before I was born. Good for you. What I care about is what you're advocating now. And she was advocating for leaving American citizens in the dust and creating a new third world system right here within the confines of America. And I just wasn't having it. So now we're going to quickly run through the rest of what I have for you in today's show. Lots of content today. We probably could have done I don't know, but we're not even going to engage in that because we're loving what we have right now. This is awesome. So now you have Stacey Abrams, gubernatorial candidate in Georgia. She talks about banning AR-15s, refuses to say whether or not she would confiscate them from Georgians. I know we have a huge audience in Georgia, numerous stations there. Let's listen to her. It's number 2.
I know that the most responsible gun owners understand that they have the responsibility for the firearms and making sure that only responsible people have those firearms. That's why I believe in a background check. I believe in a 3-day waiting period. I believe that those who commit domestic violence and stalking should not have access to weapons. I do not believe that weapons of mass destruction like the AR-15 belong in civilian hands.
So you think
and I don't think any. I do. I think they should be prohibited from civilian use. I've shot an AR-15, and I think you probably have too. And while it's an amazing amount of power, It also is an amazing amount of destruction.
So she'd ban the AR-15, but she wouldn't ban the other long gun that's made of wood that has the same destructive power. I, too, have fired an AR-15. In fact, I built one. Oops, I got you one up, Stacey Abrams, since we're talking about who all fired one. I not only have fired one, I own one. I built it myself from the screws, pins, and little pinions, all that stuff. Built it with my own 2 hands. And I can tell you, the AR-15 is no more destructive than your shotgun. It only holds more ammunition. And there are other guns that have the same functionality as the AR-15 that don't have the all-black presentation that are just as deadly. If she's fired an AR-15, good for her, but that doesn't mean she has the right to tell Georgians they can't own one. She doesn't understand the Heller decision. She doesn't understand the Second Amendment, and I'm happy to teach her. Shall not be infringed. Enough said. That's it. So, Rebecca in Michigan, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So I was just calling in about you were talking about the jobs earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how it is in every state, but I know that we can't even get people to show up for work here. They built Little Caesars Arena, and the construction company is getting fined because they were offering people between $30 and $40 an hour to show up, and they had to hire a certain amount of Detroit city workers, and they didn't because they couldn't get them to show up for work. We have houses on my street that can't even be completed because the workers don't show up for work, and they're getting paid livable wages. You can't tell me $25 to $35 an hour isn't a livable wage.
That is a livable wage, but I can give you a solution to that. The solution is cut off all of that state money. If you have a card where you can buy enough food to survive and you don't have to work, then you're not going to show up to work. So if you cut out all of that state aid, then people would show up for those jobs because that would be their only source of income. You know why people like you and I show up for work? Because we're not getting any money.
Under the table.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're also getting paid under the table, so they don't claim that. So then
Exactly. They have their gig economy jobs. They're doing hair, whatever. They're getting paid in other ways. That's why they don't have to show up to traditional jobs. Cut all of that out. All of a sudden, they're like you and me. We know we're going to work because that's our one source of getting any income. We don't have EBT cards. We don't have checks or anything coming from anywhere else. Everything we get, we have to work for. That's how you solve that. It's not that Americans aren't employable.
Other people saying that, right, but we're cool for thinking that. Take away their benefits so they'll show up for work.
Thank you. There it is.
I hear from all the time that that's cruel.
It's not cruel. It's the way you and I are living. There's nothing cruel about that. Thank you, Rebecca, for calling the show. We're actually going to save over our conference board segment about consumer confidence for tomorrow's show. Let's have a final quick call. Keith in Michigan, you got about 30 seconds. What's your comment?
Well, it's something that you already know about, but I just want everybody else on the radio or Facebook to understand. AR does not stand for assault rifle. It's Armor Light Rifle.
Armor Light
Rifle. Nothing to do about shooting people or anything. It's a hunting rifle or a sports rifle.
It is. The reason why it's the most popular rifle is because it's lightweight and it has low recoil, meaning small women can fire it without bruising their shoulder. It's just ease of use. And most people use it for hunting, but it is also one of the top home defense rifles. And it's like neck and neck in ownership with shotguns, 12 gauge and 20 gauge shotguns, which, by the way, if you've ever fired a 20 gauge shotgun, you know you'd prefer to fire an AR-15. But any one of those makes a great home defense rifle. He's right. It's Armalite rifle. That's the brand name. It doesn't have anything to do with assaulting anything. We have the best callers. Thank you so much for being here today. God bless you from the Heartland citizens. Until tomorrow, Stacey on the Right.